Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite on this chilly Friday evening. Superintendent David James says he wants to look forward. The governor, though, wants to look back at the Williams-Bolar case, and Senator Sherrod Brown wants to look at the present. He said jobs are on the way. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. Powerful week in the news, and power indeed, especially for many of you in Stark County just getting your power back. Great to have you along. A lot to talk about tonight, so let's get to it. Pleased to have freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller here with us this week, as well as Stephanie Warsmith from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And Steve Hoffman will join us in just a few minutes, but we begin with the State of the School speech from Thursday. And Jody, you were there. No big bombshells coming out that I could see, but trying to focus on where the district is going and maybe some of the accomplishments we are. What stood out in your mind? Well,
first of all, I thought it was the best speech that David James had given since he became superintendent. He seemed much more comfortable. What stood out was at the beginning of the speech, given the Kelly Williams-Bolar case that's going on, he talked about the number of students, 370 I think it was, who have come into the Akron Public Schools because they have open enrollment from other districts, including 41 from the Copley-Fairlawn schools. What stood out to me was his tying in the relationship between educating students and keeping those students in the community when they graduate from the schools, whether they go on to further education at the University of Akron, but how important the students' education is going to be to the economy and to the future of the region. I thought it was very interesting when he really touted the fact that Akron came back with President Obama's race for the top funds. Mm-hmm. Akron submitted a grant, and their grant application had no faults in it whatsoever. Has been used as a model not only throughout the state but throughout the country for what they want to do, and Akron's now got $9 million from this race to the top funds to help improve graduation rates, teacher evaluations, and those kinds of things. Like you said, there were no really big things, but the district is in good shape. They've got 21 I think new community learning centers that have opened. I think 5 more are online to open. His emphasis also was on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and how extraordinary in its first year of operation the Inventors Hall of Fame, the middle school is, how they scored excellent in their first test scores, and how they're hoping to bring STEM. They want to build a STEM high school, and they want to bring STEM down into the elementary grades.
And Steph, you've covered education for a long time. How important are speeches like this to updating the community?
Well, I think that, it's important at least annually to, kind of take a pulse of where you are and where you're planning to go. And so, from that perspective, it's important. And David James, he has been a very, very good superintendent in Akron, and obviously he's got some good things to talk about. And no one right now can give a speech or make any remarks without mentioning the Kelly Williams-Bolar case, because that's what everyone is talking about all the time, it seems. Mm-hmm. But I thought, as Jody mentioned, him talking about the expansion of STEM is very exciting. When I was still on the education beat, I covered that as they were in the planning process for it, and I thought it was very exciting. And this is another one of those programs that is going to draw people into the Akron schools. As David James mentioned and Jody mentioned, there are students that open enroll to get into the Akron schools rather than open enrolling out. And programs like the STEM school, like Miller South, like the International Baccalaureate program at Firestone High School, these are reasons that people want to come into the Akron schools, and that the Akron schools really have a good reputation. When you hold them up to the other urbans in the state, they continuously outperform the other districts.
Was the word levy mentioned at all yesterday? Because that's the question that all voters are always asking.
Exactly, and it really wasn't mentioned, although toward the end of the speech, don't forget, David James is a businessman. Mm-hmm. He's not necessarily educated as an educator. And he did talk about the fact that when the state budget comes out, given the fact that education is such a big part of that state budget, everybody around the state, including him, they're all looking for what kind of cuts there are going to be. So he did talk in terms of collaborations and partnerships and how best to utilize the resources that they have and to do it as smartly as they can, because, Eric, there's no money.
There's no money.
There's no money.
And that's what all the districts are doing and are having to deal with, I should say. And that segues us to the next education topic. A piece from the Akron Beacon-Journal last Sunday from education reporter John Higgins followed the money. And when we're talking about the money in Revere, Steph, we're talking about real dollars to fight a school levy in order for a business to save dollars. I think this was very eye-opening for people to see.
Right. You think about, a school district putting a levy on, and you know that the district is going to be out there working to get it passed. You know that you're going to have parents, you're going to have teachers that are really going to be behind this. A lot of times even you have students that get involved, but you don't necessarily think about the counter side. And I think that that's what we're seeing more and more of. And John's story really illuminated that in Revere, which is really one of the more affluent districts in our area, you had a very organized effort. As you mentioned, they greatly outspent the district, and they were successful. You know, the levy was defeated, and Revere is among the districts that is going to be, trying again here. I believe they're going to be on the ballot on the May primary ballot.
They're on the ballot
in February.
In February.
Oh, in
February. On Tuesday,
okay.
and then in May.
And then in May, I just saw that. That was
Sure.
the listing that I just saw this week. And so, along with a lot of other districts. And so, as you drive through communities more and more that have levies on the ballot, you see not only vote yes, but you see vote no signs too.
Is that tough, though, Jody? Because they're just trying to save money, but to do so, you got to fight education, which isn't popular.
Well, absolutely. And the interesting thing about Revere is that I think, and this was very evident in the Beacon's editorial, is that voters, I think, have a right to know. It goes back to the whole Supreme Court case just recently. But voters have a right to know who, in fact, is funding the kinds of campaigns either for or against a particular issue. And in this case in Revere, voters, I don't think, had any idea that it was a business that spent an awful lot of money, $7,000, in order to save like $70,000 in property taxes. And I think they had a right to know that. That a business would, in fact, invest the kind of money that they did to send out flyers and to send out mailers and to not be totally honest with voters about why, in fact, they were opposing a levy.
Our district's in a really no-win situation, though, because they still need the funds. They're not trying to penalize businesses, but to drive a business that stands up against them is counterproductive.
Well, the problem, Eric, goes back to, what we've talked about for years and years, the whole DeRolf case, and the fact that education in this state is funded through property taxes. And businesses are going to get whacked as much as the residents are in terms of property tax rates. But in order to fund your schools, especially in what's called a high-wealth district like Revere is, your reliance is on the local property taxes to fund your schools.
And they get less than from the state because they're in a district?
Yeah. Revere gets like minimal amount of money from the state, as do most of the suburban districts. Most of the money in the state in terms of education, if I'm not mistaken, goes toward the urban districts.
Well, and then you have the lower income rural districts as well that get support. But certainly, like Jody said, in a district like Revere, they are reliant, as that Supreme Court case said that they should not be having to rely on, but they are still relying very heavily on property taxes. Property taxes, as we know, do not rise with inflation, and so they are having to continually go back and back to the voters to ask for more.
And then there are times that they're not really backroom deals, they're actually signed deals, but districts have to make deals with businesses coming into town where the schools accept less money to try to help the economy. Again, counterproductive because they're giving away money for education.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like there's this no-win situation, and what do you do? And until the state comes forward with, I think, a better way of funding schools, all districts are going to be strapped in this regard. Especially with, as Steph said, when a levy is put on the ballot, it's capped. Voters approve a levy for a certain amount of money, and it doesn't rise with inflation. So that puts schools behind the eight ball all the time.
All right, I want to talk more about the Revere levy and the other levies on the ballot as we shift our conversation now to newsnight.net.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
With the GOP sweep in Columbus in November, Sherrod Brown becomes Ohio's de facto leader of the Democratic Party. I had a chance to talk with him about that this week, as well as jobs and the Indians and a whole lot more. But when it comes to jobs, he says good news is on the way. The jobs in Ohio haven't come back as fast as people would like. What do you see here in the future?
We've had job gains in the private sector each of the last 11 months, but nothing compared to what we need, nothing to the level that we need. We're seeing auto do better. The investment in GM and Chrysler has meant thousands of more jobs in Ohio, and it's also stabilized retirement benefits and health care for a lot of GM and Chrysler retirees. Twinsburg obviously was hit hard here, but I think we're seeing an auto industry come back, and the auto industry typically has led us out of recession, especially in this state. We're the third leading manufacturing state in the country, only behind Texas and California, which are two and three times our size. So manufacturing so much matters here. Auto matters the most because of its size and the huge number of jobs in the component manufacturing supply chain. So I'm optimistic longer term. I wish we could get better job creation right now because too many people in Akron or around the state are hurting.
And you can watch the entire conversation with Sherrod Brown on NewsNite.net. I'll also be blogging about our conversation and other parts of this week's broadcast. Pleased to welcome now Steve Hoffman from the Akron Beacon-Journal to our broadcast. Stephanie will rejoin us in a few minutes. And I alluded to earlier that Sherrod Brown is now the de facto Democratic leader of the state of Ohio since the GOP sweep in Columbus. Steve, is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. He's sort of the last man standing. I think Chris Redfern might disagree that that Sherrod's the sole leader. Chris is the Democratic State Party chairman, who's madly putting out press releases. This is what state party chairmen do, whose party has been blown away. They send out a press release every 5 minutes. But yes, Sherrod has. He's the elected statewide, the only statewide elected Democrat, and someone who is a great campaigner. He will not. I don't expect him to be a shrinking violet. He is up for election in 2012 after all. But
does that mean President Obama will be leaning on him for his own reelection?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things about a presidential campaign in a state like Ohio, it's very, very helpful. First of all, you have to show up in Ohio. If you campaign for president, you have to be here. We expect it. That's what we're used to. Ohio is a diverse state. Still has, even though we're going to lose some electoral votes, we still have plenty. So it's very helpful for someone like Barack Obama or any other candidate when you show up to have somebody from that state. John Glenn used to be the icon for the Democrats. This is a role that Sherrod Brown has, and he's the one that will introduce the president in big appearances. He's the one that will remain behind to push the programs. When the president mentions a program or policy, the follow-up often will go through Sherrod Brown's office. That's the details. So he's a go-to guy for the Democrats.
Yeah, and Jody, you had a chance to hear the interview. We began by talking about the State of the Union, and he got mixed in with the Republicans, which was unique.
Well, he did. But I think they tried to do the civility thing in terms of the State of the Union. He was sitting with, I think, Rob Portman, who is the junior senator now from the state of Ohio. But in listening to Sherrod Brown, I was very impressed with just his overall grasp of given that he covers the entire state of Akron, and his references in the interview to Akron's transformation, and how it's reinvented itself from rubber to polymers to the Bio Innovation Institute, and how positive he was about the fact that this is a state and a region that can reinvent, that can outcompete and outproduce anybody, and that the future is looking bright. It's just we need jobs, and we need them now.
I think one of the things that Sherrod Brown always talks about is manufacturing. And just to interject some note of caution about manufacturing, what we've seen recently is Ohio is still a tremendous state in terms of its industrial output, its manufacturing output.
He said we were what, third
Number three.
after Texas and California.
Right.
So
the problem we have with manufacturing, this has always been, at least from our editorial board, the caution is that yes, we need to invest in manufacturing, but the employment prospects in the manufacturing sector are not necessarily rosy, because we have learned over the years, and we just learned during this recession, that employers have learned they can really improve their output with far fewer workers. And they do that through automation. And that's been a story over the last few decades in Northeast Ohio. It's advanced manufacturing. The days of the low-skill assembly line jobs are largely over. And that's not to say manufacturing isn't important. It is.
But didn't our government push for that? I mean, 25 years ago, weren't the Reagan-Bush years pushing for, you need to add more innovation?
Absolutely, and I can remember years ago when I covered the rubber industry. I mean, this was the mantra. The analysts, the Wall Street analysts, the economists looked at these massive rubber companies and auto companies and steel companies in Ohio and said, hey, you know, you people have to figure this out. You have got to automate. You have to use computers, you know, and guess what? They did.
And now
well,
it's
look at
cost
Lordstown.
jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
A great example of how you can retool a plant and a facility and do more, produce more with actually less people.
Right.
And while Sherrod Brown needs to be a lightning rod for jobs, everybody's looking, of course, to Governor Kasich, who's been on the job about a month, and it's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. So, transition, what is he doing sticking his nose into a small felony case in the city of Akron?
I think that he is sticking his nose into the small felony case here in Akron because it's gone viral. It is national news, and I think his wife alerted him to the fact that this was happening, and he wants to look into it. I think it's beyond something that the governor of the state. He's got much more, I think, pressing problems to deal with, including a potentially $8 billion budget deficit. But I think that this is the kind of a case that the best way that I can put it is that everybody's got an opinion about this particular case. And everybody is looking, and it's not the kind of a case where there's no ambivalence. Let me put it this way: people are either for Kelly Williams-Bolar or against what she has done.
Yeah, the governor.
It's just black and white, and I think he's just trying to step into it.
The governor has a very personal style, if I could describe it that way. And one of the things that came up in our story was he got a call from Jesse Jackson Jr., who he knows from his days in the U.S. House.
Who also has never been to Akron.
Right.
Well, this doesn't matter. This is not to disagree with you. This is a big felony case. This is a big little felony case, and it has gone viral. So you have the governor can't help himself. This is his nature. His wife alerts him to this. Jesse Jackson Jr. calls him. He's into this, and I think his instincts in this one are correct. Does the punishment fit the crime? That was his main concern. I think that's a valid concern. B, he brought up the issue of open enrollment. As we've discussed on this show, we have a very confusing patchwork system of local school districts. It is confusing, and this has nothing to do with Kelly Bolar Williams per se, but this is the environment that she was sort of caught in, if you will. I mean, she caught herself.
Well,
don't
thank
get me
you.
wrong.
Okay, she wasn't caught into it. She
it's
jumped into it full feet.
We have a bunch of suburban districts that do have open enrollment. We've got some that don't have open enrollment. We've got some districts that get a lot of state money. We've got other districts that don't get a lot of state money. And so I think the governor did express a concern about how this system works, going back to the Gerolf case. How do you have equal opportunity, equal educational opportunities for students when we have this patchwork system? It's not easy.
Seems like there's some folks trying to take advantage of this situation for their own gain. I got calls this week from a group that represents vouchers in Ohio, saying that the Williams-Bolar case is going to get more people interested in vouchers and we should come interview their leader. And I'm like, where in the world did you extrapolate that?
Yeah.
Well, and that to me is what has happened with this case, is it's got so many different tangents and aspects of it. If nothing else can be done, maybe it can open a dialogue, like Steve said, about how best do we fund schools, do we educate our kids, and do we educate them equally in all the different areas. But don't forget, the reason she stated that she took her kids out of Akron and put them illegally into Copley-Fairland was not because of the education they were getting in Akron. It was because she was worried about their safety.
And she reiterated that this week and also mentioned that she's tired of the national media calling her Rosa Parks. She's saying she's not Rosa Parks. I want to continue this. We have more to talk about right now on NewsNite.net.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
Let me just say the extended edition is worth going to the internet, NewsNite.net. Jody and Steve really went at it over the Kelly Williams-Bolar case. Before we go, we want to move on to one other topic and welcome back Stephanie Warsmith from the Akron Beacon-Journal to our panel. DROP, not a program a lot of people are familiar with. The state came up with this a few years ago, and this week, as the Beacon-Journal pointed out, veteran police and firefighters looking at the end of the road, and it's mandatory.
Right. Yes, they have to. If they got into the DROP program right when it started, then they are at their maximum 8 years, and they have to leave now, or they lose what they put into the program. And so you're seeing veteran police and firefighters from all across the state leave. And it's coming at a tough time, as we know, for our larger cities in particular, but even smaller cities that are struggling financially. And so the question they have to ask is, can we afford to replace these officers, or are we going to have to, just go with a leaner force?
In essence, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's an ability to start collecting your pension early and have it go into a side account that grows tax-free while you continue to work and make your salary. Kind of another side IRA of such, Steve. So it's good financially for the officers and firefighters, but this is going to be tough on communities.
This is one of these ideas that it sort of seemed like a good idea at the time. I'm not a big fan of the DROP program for a variety of reasons. One is I think that certainly I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here, but I certainly think some of the officers who were in the DROP program were just biding their time. They would, I've heard stories about, the first thing they do in the morning is turn on their computer and see how their account was doing, the account into which their retirement funds were going, and, how's the market today? Well, do you really...
Paul Helinski might beg differ, but go ahead.
Well, I imagine.
Go ahead.
I think there was it did encourage a tendency, unfortunately, at times for people just to tread water. The other thing is, with the employment picture the way it is, there are a lot of young people who need jobs, and this kept older workers on the force. Now, again, they were experienced. A lot of them had great experience, and I'm not denying that whatsoever, but it sort of stopped movement up through the ranks a little bit, which to me is a good thing. I think you want that. You want that upward movement. You want younger people to join the safety forces and any government work, and so it kind of stalled that a little bit.
It was a nice incentive, though, to keep guys around.
Yeah,
it was, and I think that was why it was originally started, was that there was a concern about there not being enough, veteran police officers and firefighters at the time, and so the state devised this as an incentive to keep them around for longer. So, but it ended up, I think, when it came to the end here, where they're leaving, as Steve said, it just is coming at kind of a difficult time, and I, will be curious to see how these communities react, whether they are going to try to replace them or go without.
Yeah, Chief Hall mentioned back in November before he left that he could anticipate this coming, which begs the question, at least in Akron, couldn't the city of Akron anticipate it? Oh, we're going to lose a dozen police officers, a dozen firefighters. We're going to save that money in our budget. I mean, there's a value here.
They did know that they were going to lose some, but the people who are retired are not required to divulge that. I think they have to give, like a 2-week notice. And so some of this information is private. You have people that have decided to not stay for the full time that's required and drop, and so they've left. You have some, that are here until the very end, but it makes it difficult for them to know exactly how many people are going to be going unless they, provide that information or when they officially file their paperwork. But they had to anticipate that there would be some, especially in a larger community like Akron.
And I think in some of the smaller communities, it again raises the question of, especially with small police departments, small fire departments, you think, why are we doing it this way? I mean, why does every little community have to have a hook and ladder truck, or its own fire chief and lieutenant and whatever? There is tremendous administrative overhead in all these little tiny units, and maybe this would be a incentive for some of them to begin to share resources, if not, merge outright. I mean, there's been some success in this area especially with dispatching. That
Right.
seems to be something that's easily centralized. So you begin to look at these experienced people, how much they cost, how much it costs to replace them, and you're thinking, well, maybe there might be a more efficient way to provide this service.
I was surprised to learn from the article that the average age of an Akron firefighter is 43. I think people think of firefighters as younger guys, these strapping young guys they see in different facets, but it really is an older force, but yet they've lowered the age to apply to 18.
Right.
Wow.
But there are no jobs for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, although the Akron, the fire department is interesting because the mayor has come up with a way to actually hire them, and it's kind of another creative means that he's come up with, where the city is having some firefighters anticipating these retirements go through training that the city isn't paying for at the University of Akron, and that way when people do retire here, when there are vacancies, they are already trained, and the city has given them conditional job offers and can hire them right away. And so this is a way that they can have people waiting that will be ready to step in.
The critical jobs, they can really just give 2 weeks notice like anybody else. The people to retire, 2 weeks notice. That really puts safety forces in a jam.
Well, I think it's a reasonable assumption that people are in the drop program when they get, as we discussed, when they get to their 8 years, or that they're going to be out of there. I think you can figure that out.
All right. Good discussion this week on a broad range of topics. Stephanie, thank you. Steve as well. Also want to thank Jody Miller for her time this week and invite you to go again to NewsNite.net to watch our extended edition of our conversations, as well as my one-on-one with U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. Next week, we'll hear from Summit County Executive Russ Pry and a lot of other great topics. We'll see you next Friday for NewsNite.